Hello, I'm Matt Hatton, founding partner at Transformer Insights, and I'm here at the Virtual Things Conference doing some interviews with the great and the good in the IoT. And today I'm here with Barney Barnowski, who is with TEKTELIC. Barney, if you could introduce yourself and say a little bit about who you are and your company.
Excellent, Matt. Thank you so much. I'm Barney Barnowski. I head up sales for TEKTELIC Communications here in North America and Asia Pacific. For those who don't know, TEKTELIC Communications is a premier supplier of gateways and devices and solutions for the LoRa ecosystem.
Excellent. Now we have a virtual event this year rather than a real event. There's been quite a lot of water under the bridge since this time last year. How has 2020 treated you?
You mean the 4 years that 2020 lasted?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
We've all got a lot more grey hairs now, right?
Yeah, I had a full head of hair when we started 2020, believe it or not. No, joking aside, I think 2020 was a challenge, to put it mildly. I think across every facet of life. So without getting and drilling into that, from an IoT perspective, though, we've seen a tremendous acceleration in terms of IoT in all walks of IoT, whether that's LoRa or some of the other ecosystems that exist, simply because as a society, we're starting to recognize the real value, right? IoT is actually poised to solve some real practical problems, whether that's in monitoring assets, people, remotely monitoring, conditions of individuals who happen to have COVID or have succumbed to the pandemic. So, I hate to say that 2020 was a good year, but from an IoT perspective, from that, purely myopic lens of looking at it from a, has it moved the yardstick forward? It was a good year, right, for IoT, because I think people are coming to the terms with the fact that this thing is actually solving real problems. For us, specifically at TEKTELIC, I mean, we've rounded out work on a couple of products that we're bringing to the market this year. So we finished work on a couple of new gateways. We do lots of gateways. One of them we're launching here at the show. So I'm not going to give away Jack's speech later on. And then we're also starting to deploy some full end-to-end TEKTELIC branded solutions. And we'll talk a little bit more, hopefully, about those later. Hint.
Yeah, absolutely. I will get onto that in just a moment. Starting to return to some normalcy in 2021. Is that how you see it? Obviously, IoT has been tremendously useful in 2020. Do you think 2021 we're kind of going to go back to how things were? Do you think everything's accelerated that bit further?
I think normalcy is a really loaded term. I think there's going to be a new normalcy, right? We're seeing a lot more companies coming to terms with the fact that they can actually do work remotely, right? Which throws that whole, occupancy solution into question, right? Like, I think we're going to see more building remote monitoring type solutions that are coming to the forefront, right? So no, I don't think 2021 is going to be, kind of like 2019, right? The year before 2020, if we still remember that one. But I think it is going to have some very interesting and neat developments that are going to be happening in the space of IoT. I think what we're starting to see, again, because of the acceleration caused by 2020, is we are going to start seeing a movement out of the enterprise, out of that sort of corporate IoT world, that industrial IoT world, into the consumer space. That's where I think we're seeing more of LoRa. We're going to start seeing someone, maybe even us, coming to the table with solutions that people can simply take off the shelf, and they will just work, right? It'll just be IoT that just works.
Yeah, fantastic. And in fact, I was doing a little roundup of what happened at CES. Obviously, nobody was at CES for real. There was a whole load of virtual events. Tons of stuff on health and wellness and water and air quality and all those sorts of things. So I think it's probably grabbed the imagination a little bit in terms of the value of IoT, maybe on that consumer side of things as well as enterprise.
I completely agree. And in particular, I think what we're starting to see is a tremendous push in terms of wearables, right? I mean, we've had wearables for ages, right? I mean, with the Fitbits, the Apples, etc. But now we're seeing, I guess, a shift call it a differentiation. It's not just IoT of things. Now we're getting into IO of specific things, right? So we're starting to see IoT of medical devices, or IoT medical devices, IO of medical devices, right? Or IO of industrial devices, right? So we're starting to see a lot more differentiation. Again, because I mean, it's not like IoT just suddenly appeared overnight, right? We've been at this, depending on who you talk to, for 20 years, right? And now we're just, I think, starting to finally catch that sort of crest of the wave, where we're seeing some real solutions starting to come out of that. And obviously, by virtue of that, we're starting to see tremendous amount of differentiation in this space.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Hey, listen, I want to talk about a bit about TEKTELIC.
Sure.
Bit of an authority on carrier grade gateways. Can you talk a little bit about carrier grade gateways, why that matters, why it's important?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, and I mean, this has been our message for a number of years. And LoRa, as a technology, in order for it to be treated seriously by serious companies, has to become truly an infrastructure solution that can simply be deployed and, to put it bluntly, forgotten about, right? And the way to do that is to build equipment and infrastructure equipment that you don't have to lose sleep over, right? If you're the network operator, if you're the guy responsible for putting assets up on towers, the last thing you want to do is get a phone call on Saturday night or Sunday morning that one of your gateways is out, right? We key in on that specific requirement, and we make sure that our gateways are built to withstand extreme environmental conditions. They're built for extreme longevity, right? So our mean time between failures is on the order of 15 years. But equally important is we built to withstand and meet demanding RF conditions, right? Because quite often, you're dealing with, RF is a, ever-changing space. So the last thing you want to do is succumb to interference from someone who's introduced something within your environment, right? So all of our gateways come with built-in filters, built-in lightning protection. So it's really a philosophy of building infrastructure. We get excited about it, but at the end of the day, we don't want it to be exciting, right? Because the last thing you want is for your network to go down and have that kind of excitement, right? So we're not looking at that, right? We want to be one of those solid infrastructure assets. We want our brand to be associated with, what? We put it up there, you put up a TEKTELIC gateway, it just works, and leave it there.
So you don't want networks having interesting times. It's a curse to live in interesting times kind of an issue, right?
Exactly. We don't want exciting phone calls. We don't want excitement. We want our network operator partners to be, working with their, focusing on their business cases, focusing on deploying real life solutions, solving real challenges, in society. LoRa's so beyond, as a technology, it's so beyond the proof of concept level, right? It's like, we know LoRa works. We know our gateways work. Guys, just put them out there and start testing your business case, right? Start testing your business case, or start testing your solution that's going to improve the livelihood of people. Worry about that, right? You shouldn't have to worry about, oh, this gateway doesn't connect to this thing. And you'll see that as we progress through 2021, not just us, well, importantly for us, but it's just IoT just has to work, right? That's kind of our philosophy, has always been our philosophy, and that's what we're working towards too.
Good stuff. One of the things about LoRa as a technology that I love is I'll describe it as the vibrant ecosystem that exists. There's a whole load of companies in that ecosystem, and they kind of spark off each other and work very well together. How do you see yourself fitting into and playing in that ecosystem?
So I think it sort of dovetails into the thing I just said last, right? Ultimately, we want to be able to, so let's rewind the tape. When LoRa first became a thing, even when the things network became a thing, there was a tremendous amount of excitement and innovation in the maker community, and people were building LoRa gateways, and they were building end devices, and everyone was trying to pull this thing together and make it all work. Like I said, we're really beyond that. So as a company, we're trying to really enable and remove roadblocks for people to get to basically just solving real problems, right? And part of that roadblock is simple configuration of devices, simple configuration of gateways, and simply, a lot of simple words, just the ability to streamline the process of being able to stand up that coverage so that when you take a little device it just starts giving you the data that you're interested in, right? And this is where you can really now start seeing people with real good imaginations coming to the table and saying, aha, I can now create, leverage this little device that's giving me whether it's temperature or humidity or CO2 readings, and I can create a optimized, office cleaning solution out of that, right? So there's a tremendous amount of innovation that we're going to see, but in order to get there, people have to get out of the lab and stop validating that this thing works. It does, right?
Absolutely. Hey, we've talked a little bit about 2020, a little bit about return to normalcy. Any other predictions for what we'll see in 2021?
So I think I already mentioned the fact that I think we're seeing a trend out of it's interesting because in the enterprise space, from a technological perspective, I remember we went through a phase where IT was always behind the consumer space, right? Where basically the tools that consumers had access to, whether it's Gmail or things like that, just weren't available at some point in the enterprise. We were dealing with Oracle mail or some very antiquated type technologies. What we're seeing now, though, is we're seeing the adoption of some of these industrial / enterprise level solutions now starting to get adopted within the home, right? So, with things like Sidewalk, for example, we're starting to see the democratization of this long range connectivity where, if you have, and I hate to beat up on this use case, but yeah, pet tracking. I have dogs. I do very much want to know if my dog is on my property, outside my property, and I can track him for at least a certain amount of distance, right? That solves a real problem. That solves an emotional problem for me, right? Because I love my dog, right? So we're starting to see IoT starting to sort of address these, real emotional problems for people, whether that's, knowing that you have some device or some wearable attached to grandma or your older aunt, and you can monitor her, and that her house is in comfort or she's in comfort, right? So we're starting to see IoT hit those pain points, not just from the big corporate. I can monitor my water meters and know how much data I'm collecting from those things, but actually starting to sort of be adopted more broadly within society to solve and address real problems.
Brilliant stuff.
Yeah.
You mentioned wearables.
Yeah.
You seem to be wearing a wearable at the moment.
What am I wearing?
whether they're tucked in the jacket pocket is a typical place for a wearable, but you seem to have one. Tell me a little bit about that.
If I had it in my pocket, you wouldn't have asked me about it. So that's why I have it on the outside. So this was strategic. This is our contact tracer. So as I mentioned, TEKTELIC is now moving more into the end-to-end solution space, specifically leveraging the gateways, the software assets that we've developed, and also our end devices. So when COVID first kind of became a reality for all of us, we created a solution that allows us to leverage LoRa and Bluetooth to a certain extent, initially to teach people what 6 feet was, right? 6 feet or 2 meters in Europe, right? Because it's remarkable if you tell people you need to socially distance. Is this a meter? Is this a meter, right? So what this device does is it makes you aware haptically, right? So it vibrates and it beeps if you're too close to someone, for starter. And then secondly, it uses LoRa to relay that information that, hey, these two individuals were too close, right? So we have that contact trace information. And the other problem that we saw with some of the existing solutions, like whether those like the apps or the phones, was adoption, opt-in, right? So people weren't downloading the apps onto their phones, and if they had a dongle that they had to recharge, after 2-3 days, people were basically leaving these things, in the cradle or in their cars, and they just weren't using them. So what's the point of even contact tracing? With these devices, because we're leveraging LoRa, you don't have to recharge this, right? It lasts for 3 to 6 months, depending on usage. And then at the end of 3 months, you just replace the battery, right? So from an opt-in perspective, from the ability to, again, make technology simple to use, make technology adoption simple. The only thing I have to do is just wake it up in the morning, put it in my pocket, and I've complied with whatever the corporate standards are, which at TEKTELIC are, so that we all trace each other and make sure we know we're, in case there is a case of COVID.
Brilliant stuff. And hopefully it won't even need a 6-month battery life. That's what we've all got our fingers crossed over, right? So
absolutely, absolutely,
okay.
Right. I mean,
brilliant. That's all we've got time for. But thank you very much for that. Really interesting stuff, Barney.
absolutely.
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much, and looking forward to 2021. Take care.